Our water, quite naturally a mix containing lots of different substances. One of them is arsenic. It's a life-threatening element, and it can be found in German groundwater too. Andreas Kappler and his team have decided to investigate this toxin.
Arsenic is treacherous because you can't smell or taste it, but it can be deadly.
Bangladesh. Here, arsenic is causing the biggest mass poisoning in human history. Death comes from the well. Every year, more than 20 million people are affected, with hundreds of thousands seriously ill and tens of thousands of deaths. Is there help for these people? They're tasty, rice products from Asia. And they're popular in Germany.
Ökotest recommends parents don't give their children rice cakes. Consumers, including parents, have no way of knowing how much arsenic's in a product.
Arsenic, an invisible threat. In Germany too? Pure German water, healthy and without side effects, we believe. Earth scientist Andreas Kappler from the University of Tübingen wants to know for sure. He's traveling to the spa town of Wiesbaden with a PhD student to find out.
This well used to supply water for various cures. We want to know whether it contains arsenic, and if so, how much.
There's arsenic in Germany's groundwater everywhere. The darker the red, the greater the contamination. Everyone in Wiesbaden, the state capital of Hesse, has access to the well-known healing water. The two scientists performed the test.
It smells of sulfur. It tastes of iron.
It's said to be very healthy, and if you do this to yourself once a month, it won't harm you.
Let's take a sample.
The sample. The scientists want to know more about the water's ingredients. Is it really healthy? And how much arsenic does it contain? The medicinal spring is popular with locals and tourists alike. The small warning plaque with the recommended daily dose is often overlooked. The team takes samples of the water for the lab in Tübingen. They'll present the results shortly. Arsenic is a natural element. It's in the soil, and it's a global problem. In the Himalayan regions in particular, many countries are battling with it, especially in Bangladesh, a country of 160 million people and great poverty. Growing rice is the main source of income for the rural population, and that requires a lot of water. Large parts of the population don't have mains water. The surface water's polluted. What about clean rivers and lakes? That's a negative too. To even get at drinking water, more than 3 million wells have been drilled in Bangladesh, starting in 1971. But in doing so, the country opened a Pandora's box. It released the arsenic in its soils. It was the largest mass poisoning in human history. The Himalayas were formed millions of years ago. During that process, arsenic ores were created. In the erosion that followed, they were washed into the rivers and floodplains. That's why there are zones with particularly high arsenic concentrations in the soils all around the Himalayas. Andreas Kappler is in the arsenic region. He's looking for affected individuals and working on solutions, but he needs more precise data. Abdul Rana has been drinking water from the village well for the past 20 years. The consequences for his health and that of his family have been dramatic. Andreas Kappler approaches them carefully. He wants to learn more about their water consumption and the consequences. These hands speak a clear language for the scientists. Small scabby areas are the first sign of arsenic poisoning. The black spots are the external signs of severe arsenic poisoning. This man has terminal cancer. The farmer has been battling his disease for the past 10 years, Andreas Kappler is told. Even though the well was dug by international organizations, there's no financial assistance for the sick. Nobody's taking responsibility. The man uses cream to get some relief, but that's all the medical help there is. The farmer's well. The lab results will later reveal that this water has an arsenic content 170 times the WHO recommended maximum. The population in Bangladesh has been growing rapidly for decades, as has poverty. As a result, surface water ceased to be usable in the 70s. Infectious diseases spread. Organizations such as UNICEF decided to act. Pumps brought water from a depth of up to 60 meters, clean groundwater. But polluted surface water flowed into the clean groundwater and caused bacteria to grow. They in turn dissolved the arsenic from the rock, and the water became increasingly polluted. The exact figures are unknown, but health organizations estimate that there are some 70,000 arsenic-related deaths per year. It's almost impossible to escape the arsenic. It's in many foods.
The fish are farmed in a lake that's fed with groundwater polluted with arsenic. Most people in Bangladesh, particularly the poor, don't know that the fish also contains arsenic. That's a big problem because the fish end up on people's plates and the arsenic is absorbed into people's bodies where it causes damage.
Rice, the staple food in Bangladesh. It's important for the country and also for export to Europe. It's washed with the polluted well water and it's cooked in the same water too. Rice straw is used as a fuel for the simple oven. Rice is served every day for every meal. It's an unbalanced diet, an additional danger since it exacerbates the consequences of arsenic poisoning.
The arsenic problem is trivialized by the authorities and the government in the sense that they do little. No money is made available to solve the problem.
The team finds a further well right next to the latrine in the neighboring village. The analyses will later reveal one of the highest arsenic counts ever measured in Bangladesh. More than 300 times the WHO maximum.
The arsenic is the first thing we're going to deal with, but we also deal with the general conditions. It smells very strongly here. The toilet is right behind us, behind the drinking water source. That's very problematic. When you come to a village like this as a scientist and you collect data and see the affected individuals who are suffering from arsenic poisoning and who've lost relatives as a result, then it really affects you and you want to help the people. It's difficult. I can't just say, look, your toilet's right by your drinking water. That would be very condescending. What are they supposed to do?
Help is urgently needed. Simple, inexpensive solutions are required so that these children can have a future free from arsenic. 1,700 kilometers further east, Andreas Kappler is examining filters in Vietnam. With them, the arsenic can easily be removed from the groundwater. Could these filters help the people of Bangladesh too? Communist Vietnam has opened up more to capitalism. The country is bursting with energy. More and more traders, more and more companies. The economy is booming. The urban population's growing, and so water consumption's increasing. This could have drastic consequences for the arsenic content of the groundwater. In the outskirts of Hanoi, the people still use the old wells with the filters. The central water supply hasn't come here yet. Years ago, the people of Vietnam had the same problem as the Bangladeshis. How could the rural population be protected from the toxic arsenic in the drinking water? The solution was as simple as it was brilliant. Sand filters were developed.
These filters are based on the principle that water containing arsenic and iron is run through sand. The iron is deposited in the form of rusty orange ferrous minerals, as you can see from this foam on the surface. The arsenic bonds with the ferrous minerals and is removed from the water. So the water that flows out of this filter is, in principle, free from arsenic.
This solution has saved the lives of many. Andreas Kappler and his colleague want to know whether the filters are still working after all these years. This long-term study is particularly important for the development of new filters. It's easy to check whether such a sand filter is working. That's fundamentally important in the case of an invisible toxin such as arsenic. The arsenic builds up in the red layer. The black layer reveals that the filter is still intact.
It's extremely easy to check if the filter's working. You don't need expensive, elaborate analyses.
Monique Patzner and her colleague Lan from the University of Hanoi take hair samples from the local residents. Arsenic builds up in the hair and fingernails, so it's particularly easy to detect there.
At first, they're against it. They don't want to have their hair cut. But when you tell them what it's about and that they could be at risk, then they're willing to give us hair samples.
The team take a total of 3,000 samples for a new study in the Hanoi region. Is arsenic still a problem in Vietnam? The hair from the urban and rural populations was examined separately so that any differences in the arsenic contamination could be detected. Andreas Kappler and his team are working closely with the experts from Hanoi University.
We've learned that the hair we've examined contains high concentrations of arsenic, meaning that these people clearly consumed water with high arsenic concentrations over an extended period of time.
What's surprising is that this is true for many of the urban residents too. Although the area around Hanoi is highly contaminated with arsenic, many residents are allegedly connected to mains drinking water, so they should have no problem with arsenic. The German-Vietnamese team want to learn more about access to drinking water, and so they do a survey. The participants are chosen to be representative. Families with children are a particular target group.
When we interview a mother with a child, she sometimes says she's worried when her child drinks this water because she doesn't know if it contains arsenic.
The result is incredible. There are still many people in Hanoi who use the old wells, even without sand filters. The danger's not recognized. Arsenic's invisible after all.
Some people here already have working filters. Some are connected to mains water. The problem of arsenic in the groundwater is real, and it'll get worse in years to come, because the water table will drop as a result of the amount of water being removed. More arsenic will be released. The number of contaminated wells will affect more and more people in rural areas in the coming years, and that's the problem.
Arsenic's widespread in Germany too. Many municipalities don't want to talk about it because that would alarm the public. But Schwarzenbrock near Nuremberg is open about the subject. A lot of money has been invested. The fancy blue arsenic filtration system for 9,000 residents cost 400,000 euros. The municipality had to act.
The drinking water regulations were changed. New maximums were set, lower by around a factor of 10. Suddenly we found we had excessive concentrations, so we had to act and built this filtration system.
Unlike in Bangladesh and Vietnam, the necessary money is available here. The citizens pay.
I think the population's willing to pay a bit more for their water if they get a good water quality.
The danger posed by arsenic has been reassessed since the start of the millennium. Improved facilities are intended to provide optimal protection.
These filters contain iron hydroxide powder. It's capable of binding arsenic very tightly. These filters are packed with this black powder. The water's channeled through the filters, the arsenic's bound and thereby removed from the water.
Andreas Kappler was a scientific consultant in the development of these granules. A perfect solution, but unaffordable for Bangladesh. Kushtia in Bangladesh. Andreas Kappler wants to understand the situation in the cities. Some households are connected to mains water, but only the rich can afford this. That's why many residents still get their water from the central wells.
We're taking water samples from a drinking water source that's evidently used by many people. We'll test these samples for their arsenic content when we're back home.
Kappler was asked by a local doctor to take samples here. There's not a lot of trust in the authorities, who only rarely test the water. Andreas Kappler meets the doctor who's fighting against arsenic in Bangladesh. Abdul Munir runs a surgery in which he treats many with arsenic poisoning. He sees the suffering of the people here every day. Many of his patients with arsenic poisoning have died without him being able to help them. This man is also highly contaminated. But Dr. Munir didn't just want to remain helpless. He developed an idea. The filters in Vietnam were his inspiration. The sand filters that were developed initially turned out to be ineffective. What worked in Vietnam was a flop at first in Bangladesh. But why? International scientists worked on a solution to the problem. They found that the iron necessary for the filtration process was not in the water in Bangladesh. Unlike in Vietnam, the filter needed a new component.
This is the difference between the drinking water filters in Vietnam and Bangladesh. This layer consists of fine iron flakes that oxidize in time, forming these orange ferrous minerals. It's this layer that binds the arsenic, removing it from the water. That's not necessary in Vietnam, since the groundwater already contains a lot of iron, forming exactly the ferrous minerals necessary to remove the arsenic.
The two-tier filtration systems have gone into mass production. With the simplest of means, labor in Bangladesh is cheap and material costs are low too. Nevertheless, the filter has a crucial disadvantage. It costs 50 euros. Given that the average daily wage is 50 cents here, there are almost no Bangladeshis who can afford that. there's no support from the government, which is currently planning to drill deeper wells. Andreas Kappler is not convinced by this plan.
In my view, drilling deeper wells poses a big danger because it's only a matter of time until these new wells are also contaminated with arsenic. It's not a long-term solution.
The people are grateful for every filter. They're often donated by foreigners. While help often comes too late for many adults, they signify a better future for the children, who can have clean drinking water for the first time. A view from above shows that the villages are primarily surrounded by paddy fields and therefore by a lot of water. Bangladesh largely practices wet field cultivation, as is the case for 80% of the world's rice production. More than 50 million tons come from Bangladesh. Kappler has a suspicion.
If this water that's used to irrigate the paddy fields is groundwater, we would expect to see worrying arsenic concentrations.
If the scientists' worries are true, that could also have consequences for consumers in Germany.
Bangladesh sets its own maximum of 50 micrograms per litre, which is 5 times higher than the globally recognised figures of the WHO. The lower figures cannot be achieved here, and so the government has made it a little easier for itself with its own figures.
Rice plants absorb the arsenic in the water. Even at low levels, the consequences are grave, because the arsenic builds up in the plants, which then store it in concentrated amounts in the rice kernel. The scientists from Tübingen find arsenic here too. This woman's husband recently died of arsenic poisoning. Andreas Kappler meets with her and a doctor. During all the encounters, he keeps raising the subject of drinking water. He deliberately stays away from the subject of rice.
We don't want to scare people. That's why we can't tell them that the rice they're consuming contains high levels of arsenic. They have no alternative, and they don't have the money to buy other food.
The rice is largely intended to feed the national population, but it's traded globally too, not least to Germany. Rice cakes are particularly popular. Babies, children, and those conscious of their diets like eating them. We want to find out, with the help of Ökotest, whether the arsenic from Asia is also a problem for German consumers.
We investigated 20 rice cakes and tested them for their arsenic content, and especially their inorganic arsenic, because that's the toxic form.
Test shopping in the supermarket. The shopper remains incognito. Manufacturers mustn't learn the shopper's identity, otherwise they'd be able to respond to the test buys in advance. Katja Tölle makes an exception and accompanies him for once. The shopper examines the identifying markings on the packaging. Several packages from the same batch have to be purchased. The cakes are broken up and analyzed in a special lab. This is not the first time they've been tested.
We tested rice cakes 4 years ago and found they were contaminated with arsenic. Now we expect manufacturers to have dealt with the problem, particularly since new maximum values for inorganic arsenic in rice cakes were introduced on the 1st of January.
When rice cakes are made, the arsenic levels even increase.
The result was horrifying. 10 of the products had the worst verdict of all: unacceptable. The top European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA, has been saying since 2009 that inorganic arsenic is carcinogenic. triggering tumours in the lungs and the urinary passage, and also causing skin cancer.
To be clear, although Bangladesh has an extreme arsenic problem, rice from many other producer countries is also contaminated with arsenic. That's why food companies prefer not to label the countries of origin.
It's up to individual countries whether they feel they can still process rice from Bangladesh in the future because of their contaminated soils and groundwater. Are there rice varieties that are less contaminated? The question here is for producers. Can they find varieties that don't have such high levels of arsenic?
Ökotest advises consumers not to eat rice cakes. Most are unsuitable, especially for children. We're back in Wiesbaden. A few weeks ago, Andreas Kappler took water samples from a medicinal spring here. He even tried it personally. The town's public fountains are considered positive for our health. His team tests the figures listed on the fountain. Importantly, there's a crucial difference between drinking water and medicinal water in Germany.
Drinking water must fulfill standards that allow consumers to drink the water daily over a long period of time, years. Medicinal water, on the other hand, is allowed to contain higher levels of certain substances.
Medicinal water requires a state permit in Germany. It's considered a drug. Surprisingly, there's no maximum figure for its arsenic content. There's arsenic in the ground all over Germany. The maximum value of 10 milligrams per litre for drinking water is clearly exceeded in the medicinal water in Baden-Baden, Aachen and Wiesbaden, all famous spas. But Dürkheim has the second highest arsenic content in the world. The spring was only closed down in 2013. Earth scientist Andreas Kappler believes arsenic is a globally underestimated problem. He draws his very personal conclusions.
I only recently drank this water from Wiesbaden, but now that I've seen the results of our analysis, I wouldn't drink this water again.
Arsenic, the creeping killer. We can't taste it, we can't smell it. Small quantities are harmless, but daily consumption inevitably leads to serious health problems.